Hi everyone, we'll just wait a few more minutes just for people to join us and then we'll get started. People still having lunch, getting coffee.
Lunchtime.
Yeah.
Lunchtime.
We might make a start at 12:03.
Although I have an issue with odd numbers, but never mind.
I'll do it right 12:02 turning 12:03.
No. No, but my daughter does. She has a everything has to be on a 4 or multiples of 4 or whatever on the radio in the car.
Yeah.
And it's like, multiples no, you can't 4. Do that.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Right, it's her favourite number. Yeah.
Good on her.
I don't know. It's her thing.
Everyone's got a thing.
Everyone's got a thing. That's it. We're all just cruising through life with our things, trying to work it out.
That's it. That's it.
What does it all mean? What do you mean by that?
I think that's right.
Right. We'll get going and I'm sure that people may join us as we sort of start today, but we'll get going. So welcome everybody. We're here today to hear from an industry thought leader, Andy Lamb, in the first of the Westmead Research Hub's Commercialisation Seminar Series events for 2023. The Westmead Research Hub exists to foster collaboration among our 7 partners here at Westmead. Where we can collaborate, we aim to. And the Westmead Research Hub works to offer these opportunities for our researchers to work, learn and network together and build on the shared strengths that we have here at Westmead. I'd first like to begin today by acknowledging that I am hosting this webinar from the lands of the Gadigal and Wangal clans of the Eora Nation. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work and meet today, and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today in this webinar. Andy is the Director of Innovation Studios and Program Facilitator, Designer and Mentor of the CSIRO On Prime program. A thought leader in startup thinking, innovation and disruption by doing, Andy carries a broad range of experience in different industries and businesses of all sizes. He specialises in educating, training and supporting business owners and their teams to challenge the norm and inject a new approach to overcome their innovation challenges. And that is no different from researchers taking innovative approaches to commercialising their research. I also wanted to let everybody know that if you have questions throughout the webinar, please either use the chat function or the Q&A function, or take yourself off mute, put your hand up. We want this to be a conversational and interactive webinar, so please feel free to jump in with questions. If you type them in, I'll direct them to Andy. And with that, I will now throw over to Andy. So welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Kat. Hello, everyone. Hello, what are we? Thursday lunchtime. Hope you've got something to fuel up on. Got a drink of water. As Kat said, I want this to try and be as interactive as possible. Okay, so I don't really want to listen to my voice for the next 45, 50 minutes. So if you've got any questions whatsoever, if you don't agree with anything, if you do, whatever, I don't care. Right, I've got a whole bunch of slides. I've got 642 to get through. So if you can keep your questions very brief, then we should be good. And for those of you that think I'm serious, I don't. I've only got about 20 slides. All right, so so we'll go through this. And what I wanted to start with, as I've got to get my head back into the Teams mode, because I've been working in WebEx mode over the last couple of days. So you should be able to see that. Fingers crossed. Hey, thanks, Kat. All right. So what I wanted to talk to you about today is kind of trying to work out, identifying commercial opportunities, right? Commercial ideas. And I think one of the things that Kat mentioned before was that a lot of what we do in this space, right, is trying to unlock value, right, as we go through something. And unlocking the value actually takes something from the research lab into I was going to say the real world, but it's all the real world, right? Unless you think the Matrix is upon us, and then we're not all in the real world. We're all in some sort of game. But the whole point of this is to kind of unlock the value of what we have in the world, which is world-leading, world-class research. And when you look at the tables from OECD that comes out, we're consistently in the top 5. But we're really, really bad at doing something with them, right? Of commercializing them, of getting them out, of working out what that journey needs to be as well. And so a lot of what we're going to go through is kind of, a bit of my background, kind of how I ended up where I am today, which isn't probably your typical approach. But I think one thing that I've always done is I've always kind of had this thirst for new knowledge and understanding and trying to work out what's going on and challenging the status quo and not really, kind of sitting there going, oh, I've learned this now. I just want to kind of move into process mode and keep going. And so a little bit kind of around me is that, which is ironic given that I'm working in the space that I'm working in now, which is kind of universities and research and science, is that I wasn't able to go to university because I didn't get 50% in English in Perth. And back in the late 80s, that was the thing. So I kind of fell into the corporate space, and I worked for global consulting companies, global finance companies, and it was all around what we would now call an intrapreneur. So it was all kind of special projects, weird stuff that nobody really knew what to do with. And through that, instead of doing an MBA, I did a Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Swinburne when I was living in Melbourne. And that really kick-started my entrepreneurial journey in earnest. I'd kind of dabbled beforehand, but never really got focused around it. So I ended up bringing a company back to Perth to start it up here, which I did. And then I started at the Adelaide office. I built a number of software consulting businesses. I built an accelerator, incubator, and co-working space as well. I've invested in a load of businesses, both from an angel investor, early stage perspective, through to, listing on stock markets and those kind of things, and taking early shares in that sort of approach as well. For my sins, I still do a bit of corporate work, but it's more around kind of creative thinking, leadership, trying to get people out of how they normally work, right? And we all do this. We all work in what we know and the process that we've been through and how we've been, how we've developed as humans as we go through that. Okay, and as we go through that, what we have to do is we have to work out at what point in time do I say I need to understand something or learn a new skill or do something different. Okay, as we go through that. And then the other thing, I do some government stuff as well, but I'm not very good with old sort of policy and things going too slow, and I put my foot in my mouth quite often. So I tend to tell it how it is, which isn't the best approach for that. But predominantly it is science, research, applying, startup thinking, engaging new ways of work, unlocking your kind of creative self, those kind of things. That's the space I work in, which is, like I said, ironic considering I didn't get an undergrad and the university wouldn't let me go. So some of what I just mentioned is really around this concept of if we use the same thinking to try and solve problems that when we created them, it's not going to work because everything moves forward. And I've always tried to find out whether this quote is true or not from Einstein, and it's anecdotal. So we don't really know, right, whether it is or not, but it is this whole thing of we've got to constantly try and change not just the technical aspects of what we do, because I think you know, a lot of the time as scientists and researchers and administrators, you can do that, but it's really the approach that we take to this as well, right? And how do we move forward and unlock that? And I think one of the things that we often talk about as you know, somebody that either starts this journey or starts a program such as you know, the CSIRO on programs, it can feel a bit like a roller coaster. And I think, you know, if we were in the room and I'd say, hey, who loves roller coasters? And people put their hands up, right? And then people go, who hates roller coasters? And people put their hands up. And it's really about the perspective that you bring. Is sometimes people will push through that fear because they like the end point. They like the adrenaline rush. Sometimes people can't actually, you know, do that, can't get there, right? And it's a bit like this entrepreneurial commercialization journey as we go through. It's not easy, right? But it's not a matter of going, hey, I've got a new widget, I've got a new therapeutic, I've got a new device. It's somebody else's problem now. I've done all the hard work, right? Because it's not. This is a long-term kind of, you've got to constantly be pushing yourself as you go through. And it's not for everyone. But one of the big things I often say to people is sometimes it's about working out at what stage you're good at, right? Where are your skills? But then building the network around you to actually engage those people that can help you on your journey as well, rather than just like the CSIRO's impact framework was described to me one day of being people walk up to a wall and they've got their science and they think it's all done and they just lob it over the wall and think, someone's going to pick it up and move on. And then this thing will change the world. Okay. It doesn't work like that. And it's about knowing and building networks of people that can help you on your journey. So a bit of a stat, these are startup stats, right? So, and the commercialization journey mirrors this as we go through. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes less, all these kind of things. But the thing I wanted to highlight around this is the biggest challenge that we have, right, is that we build stuff that nobody needs, right, or wants, okay? The second biggest problem is that we actually we end up with we run out of cash. Okay, and usually teams and projects that run out of cash is because of item number one as well. So they're all interrelated. And the third one is kind of what I just said is you've got to build your tribe to help you go through this. Right, you've really got to start to go, I can't do this by myself. So who else is on the journey with me? And our approach as humans is that we like to surround ourselves with people that think the same, you know, dress the same. We can have a conversation, musically, you know, all these type of things. We're attracted to that sameness. And I think as you're going through this journey, you've got to find people that aren't the same as you, right? That will help you that will challenge you, that will unpack some of your thinking. And it may be uncomfortable, but that's part and parcel of this commercialization journey as you go through this. And these stats, I mean, this is from Forbes, but I did this for another program I was running and I went, okay, so I've got one source, so I'll go to someone else. They all relate back to the same source at the end. But the number one thing is you're working on something, you're solution focused, you think you're the customer or you know who the customer is. That runs out, you run out of money. And so then you end up with this situation where, you know, 7 out of 10 things don't actually see the light of day. Okay. And again, I've kind of touched on this. I think, you know, the traditional journey of a scientist and researcher is really you bring these skills, these technical skills. If you've been looking at cancer, you know, these things take a long time. but the underlying process can still be the same, right? It's an iterative approach. It's an experimental approach, right? And what happens when you run experiments is that you gather insights, okay? We often say to people is, you know, one of the big things that we're going to talk about in a minute is going and doing discovery and understanding the human side of things, right? Which is the bit that people always miss, because they are, I've got this fantastic solution, it's going to change the world, but they forget about the humans. And the humans are, this is what we do it for. We do it for us, right? We do it for better quality of life. We do it to solve problems. We do all of these things, but inherently as humans, we're resistant to change, right? And we stick doing the same thing that we've always done. And so one of the, you know, as an example of that, this slide deck is built in a product called Beautiful AI. So it's a new AI-based, or relatively new AI-based presentation tool, a bit like, you know, Chat GPT with pictures. And my traditional approach is I've got a master deck, right, of all these slides, and I just pull and drag and do all this kind of stuff. And I thought, no, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to actually learn a new product and a new skill. And it was the biggest pain in the backside over the last few days to pull all of this together, right? Because it's just not there yet. But if the simple approach would have been just to fall back into what I've always always done, right? So I just saw you popped up, Katrina, and there's a question.
That's what I was just gonna highlight. Woo-hoo! That. Yeah, go for it.
So the question is, how can one to market research quickly and easily and cheaply? Okay, let me just think about if I've got something that covers that in the next few slides. Actually, I might come back to that because I can weave a slide into that question if that's okay. So as we go through, right, you kind of build this solution, right, which could be your research package, right? Some of my solutions are the programs, the keynotes, those type of things that I deliver and how I pull them all together. And quite often is you could go, hey, you want a session on this? I'll go back into my slide deck and I'll pull all the slides out of PowerPoint and I go, here they are, and they just work and we turn up. And so at this point, as I went, no, I want to change that understanding and that knowledge and the neural pathway. So I want to use something different. And part of this process was, you know, the first thing it said, upload a PowerPoint and we'll take all of your branding. Well, I tried to upload the PowerPoint and the branding just disappeared. And then it just said, the computer says no. And I went, all right, so we've got to start from scratch. But this constant kind of iteration approach, you know, as these tools turn up, right? That's what we need to be engaged around. What can I learn from this? What's changing around me, right? And I think coming back to this question in a minute, there'll be some of those things that I think through this process I'm going to talk to you about, which will start to kind of highlight and go, okay, well, we can do this in a different way as we go through it, all right? And then, of course, you know, like I said before, a bit like that example with the CSIRO impact framework is just throwing it over the wall. It's like, hey, we've worked on this for 5 years. The science stacks up. It's really, really good. We just need to sell it. Go. But it never actually works that way, okay? But what we do as humans is we actually see the positive things where we go, right? So, you know, like when iPhones came out, right? Is now everyone goes, oh, yeah, but we've always had an iPhone. Well, no, we didn't, but there is a whole bunch of things that came up before that which prepared people to go, oh, actually, I might have a crack at an iPhone and see what it's like, even though they're really expensive. So we've often got to think about the human behavioral side and the messaging and what we're tapping into.
There's just another question there. Sorry, Andy. There's just another question there.
Research and kind of, do I need to change? Oh, look, see, that's perfect, right? Emmett, I'll come back to that. Give me a couple of slides and I'll absolutely come back to that. Okay. So you've probably all come across the technology readiness level, right? Developed by NASA, talks about, you know, how you take something from basic research, translate it, do the development, get it out there. Okay. But again, this is product and solution focused, right? And quite often when we just think about the product without thinking about the human and the process that we're going to go through, we can end up with stupid things like scissors that cut pizzas, right? If you just jump online, and that's where I grabbed this picture from, because beautiful AI couldn't quite handle the fact that I said I want a picture of a stupid idea that has no real market, and it just went right. This is what we want to do. So we want to go, hey, you've got the solution focus, but a bit like that question, right, is, well, how do I know? How do I know if I'm on the right track? Because I can almost guarantee you that most of you, it's the Google strategy of fail fast, right? But we don't do that when we get into research. We go, these things take longer, and I've got to be embedded in this, and I've got to work it out, and I've got to do this, and and as we go through these things. Right? But some of the programs I run is to teach you to go out and use some skills to actually find the human side of things, to actually go, hey, you know what? Maybe we need to tweak our research. Maybe we need to go to a slightly different area. It doesn't mean you need to throw everything out, but what you want to try and do is use a discovery around human approach to actually find out, do you need to move forward? Okay. Now, usually when I mention stuff like that, people go, yes, but we need fundamental blue sky research. We need all of these things. And I'm not saying we don't. There are some problems. I know people that have been working on muscular dystrophy solutions for over 20 years. I know they take a long time. And sometimes we have fundamental blue sky research which gets picked up and is used in something else. That does happen, but the majority of it, right, which is when you look at those ranking scales, right, is that we've got high quality, really good research, really smart minds, but we don't do what we should be doing with it, right? And so my kind of personal mission is to try and, move that gap with some of these skills. So as I said, there is a different way than just focusing on the solution, right? And a few of you have already started to post some questions around this, all right? And it's this human-centric approach, right? And fundamentally for me, it sets out with, you need to understand what problem you're actually solving. And it may seem simple on the outset, but when you drill down into it, there's a technique called the 5 whys, right? 4-year-old kids use this. 4-year-old kids, right, use this approach. They don't get the answer and they don't understand it. They'll ask why again, and then they'll ask why, and then they'll ask why, and they wear you down trying to get to it. And sometimes getting to the heart of what is the real problem, what is really happening here, right, is you've just got to keep asking why around the problem, okay? And this is what a human-centered based approach does. So you might have heard things like design thinking, design sprints. I'm going to take you through a couple of things in a minute. So value proposition, having a look at an ecosystem, those kind of things. But what we want to do is we actually want to take what you do in the science and research space around experiments and just apply it to the human side of things. And this is what we found over the years. I mean, I've been working with CSIRO for probably 6 or 7 years in the prior on program as well, when that was funded. And I was working with universities before that. Is when this human side of things, when we actually set things up as experiments and assumptions, and we use insights and that type of language, and then we support you to go through a process, all of a sudden you go, this is the same as what we do from a technical perspective with the solution, but we're just doing it with humans and the problem. And that's ultimately what we want to actually, get people towards. And then when you do that process, sometimes the IP and the commercial opportunity actually drops out of that. Because the traditional approach is, I've got this solution, I've got to go and find someone to sell it, or I've got to go and sell it. And unfortunately, as soon as you say, hey, I'm a researcher or a scientist out in, the commercial space, their preconceived ideas and their biases are, they want money out of me, right, for a research project. They're going to be overcomplicated. They're going to waste my time. They're going to be too slow. They're going to be all of these things. But what the corporate world is doing, right, the space outside of research is they're moving towards a more human-centered approach, a human-centered design approach. And so if you turn up and say, I'm not here to sell you anything, I'm not here to, tell you about how good my research is and my science is, I just want to understand your problems at the moment, they're a bit taken back and they go, what the hell? Hang on a minute. You go, yeah, well, just tell me about your problems with X, Y, or Z. And often, people like to help. People like to, share problems and those kind of things. And when you do this at scale, then all of a sudden, some of these problems start to repeat themselves. And when they start to repeat themselves, right, that's when you know that you've potentially got a problem that you can solve. And hopefully what you've been working on, you can actually apply it to that problem. Sometimes you can't, right? I have actually worked with some people, not many. And I'm talking about, I've worked with hundreds of teams, thousands of people, and I've had one single member team person that wasn't able to pivot what he was working on over all of that time, over the last sort of 6, 7, 8 years as well. Okay. Most people can take what they're doing and realign it based on the problem. They've just got to change the wording or the market or the offering or the, what's important to the customer. Right. And that comes back to some of those questions that are in the chat, right? Is how you can do your research, how you can position your research quickly and easily and cheaply, right? Don't think about it as marketing it and going out and it's a push approach. Go and explore the people that you think have the problem and listen to them. And then it reverses that, hopefully, sales model in the end. So it becomes more of a pull approach rather than a push approach. And so anyone that goes, hey, I'm a scientist, I'm a researcher, I'm not a salesperson, changing the way that you do that actually really starts to get you to identify who your customer may be. The other good thing about doing this approach I'm about to talk to you in a minute about is it's really powerful to help you work out who your customer at the end point is not. Right. And when we're in this world, we use lots of words like, oh, yeah, that might be beneficial for them, or they could use it. Hopefully they would use this, right? When you know the problem and they come back to you and you're not trying to sell them something, all of a sudden they'll go, oh, can you solve this problem for me? What will it take to actually solve this problem? And that way, that's the cheap way of being able to go out. Just go and talk to people. We can all do that. But we may need to learn some skills before we go out, because we've got to unravel how you've gone and done this in the past and how you've been beaten up when you've gone out and potentially spoken to someone and they just go, you're wasting my time, this is rubbish. And our human kind of side of things goes, I'm not doing that again, right? So I won't go and do it. Just checking in, Kat. What are some of the questions?
Yeah, it was further to what you were just saying, like what questions can you ask yourself when you're going to have those conversations with people? Or what would you what would your first approach be?
Me?
If you've got a research concept that you think might solve a problem and you want to get an understanding from people, you're going out and you're having these conversations, what sort of questions, how do you reframe how you think about your research to ask it in a way that's relevant?
Yeah, cool. Is you don't talk about your research. It's simple, right? Because what happens is we all have a happy place. And so if you go out and you're nervous, right, as well, and you're a bit taken back, you don't know how it's going to go, if you haven't practiced the technique, then what will happen is you will drop straight back into how you work normally. And so then all of a sudden you'll just be telling people about how good the technology and everything else is. And then they go, oh, can you see a need for it? What you want to do is just go out and go, if you think you're solving a problem of X, right, you want to go out and say, can you tell me about all the problems that you've got at the moment with this? And then shut up. Because that's the other thing. When there's a silence in a conversation, if we're trying to lead the conversation, we feel we need to fill it with something. And so sometimes just asking people around the problem, and they may be taken back because they're going, I've never had this before. But then say, oh, yeah, well, I'm just exploring. I don't want to drop in. You could say, look, I know as humans we drop into solution mode, but I really don't want to do that. I want to actually go out and understand the problems. And if they go, okay. And then they say, can you give me more context? And you go, oh, it could be a problem associated with this, but you want to keep it broad because you just want to see where the conversation goes. If you start getting too specific, which is the science way, right, then you've locked in that conversation. And they may have a whole bunch of information for you, but you've locked in that conversation. And that's the hard thing, because you can't get out of that thing. You've already set the tone of the conversation. You've already set, you're leading what we call leading the witness, right? Which you're not allowed to do in court. And you're not allowed to do it when you go out talking about problems as well, because you want to find problems. And this is what I said before around it. This technique helps you understand who your customer is not. So you can get really, really focused on it. So a couple of things. Oh, I've clicked the wrong side of my presentation. I'm still learning. First thing you need to do, right, you need to have a bit of a plan. And so one of the first things that I always do, that we always work with, is we get people to go out and map out, right, what's the ecosystem look like. So you put yourself in the middle, and then you try and come up with some bigger entities around that. So in this example, I've got, hospitals, manufacturers, retail, regulators, R&D, patients, right? Whatever it is. And then you want to try and break that down further. So you want to go out and go, because not all hospitals are created equal, right? They've got different motivations, right? Public, private, remote, day surgeries, right? If you break manufacturers up, right? It could be, Australia, international, right? It could be small, large, all these things. Because when you start to understand the human side of these things and these organizations that people work for, they're not the same. Right? People are driven by different things. They have different KPIs. They're trying to target different things. You might have a new drug for something, right? And you see it as a better drug, but, a pharma company is making a hell of a lot of money, right, from another drug. And they go, well, yeah, it may be a better drug, but, our aim is to actually make money for our shareholders. So we're going to do everything to try and squash what you've got. And this happens day in, day out as you go through things, right? So mapping out your ecosystem, getting as detailed as possible for the types of organizations. And then in each one of those types, so like, private hospitals, you can even break that down further. So you could go private hospitals and then WA, South Australia, New South Wales, so on. And then you could go, okay, well, is there a way I can break those up to be remote or not? And then what you want to do is you want to find the human that you want to go and speak to. And the human will have a name, or the human will have a role. And so you might turn around and say, I want to go and see. And again, right, your normal approach is probably, I want to go and see a technical, scientific, physician or whatever it is, right? But you may actually get more information about what's going on by going and speaking to a hospital administrator, which is not your normal approach, because their view of the world can actually help you identify the pathway to commercialization to actually get a customer as they go through. Because they go, well, actually, we're buying X now from these people, but in 2 years, we've got an agreement that's coming up for renewal, right? So the next question is, could you tell me what process do you go through when you actually bring in new suppliers? And it doesn't have to be specific about what you're looking at. It's just that keep it broad and understand the process, because we end up with so many good things, right? So many amazing solutions, but they die because people run out of money waiting for organizations to kind of pick up what they need to do. Why are we focusing on who is not our customer rather than who is our customer? You're not focusing on that. What happens is you're trying to find your customers, but doing the process actually helps you identify who your customer is not. Whereas before that, right, there's this attempt, everybody is my customer. And products and services and solutions that do really well in the world are really focused on finding who that, we call it a first best customer, right? And that gets you the traction and keeps going. Whereas when you don't go and do this, everybody's a potential customer, right? Even the ones that won't be a customer will tell you that they're interested. And interested is the worst word that you can ever hear back. That's interesting, or I might be interested. Because underlying it, they could just be trying to get rid of you and you don't know. So in a way to kind of map this out, I wanted to give you a couple of tools as we go through this, right? So one of the things is, and you can go and download these, and I'm going to show you a little video on how you do this, okay? But this is one of the fundamental tools that I do. After you've got a potential customer segment that you want to go and explore, is you want to write your customer segment down here. And each of those customer segments will have what's called jobs to be done, okay? And some of those jobs are painful and some of those jobs are pretty good, right? But what we do is when we're in this space, this is the right-hand side is, and the circle is the customer side. The square side is the technology, the solution, you know, the product, the services, those kind of things. And that's normally where we jump to. And so what we do is we go, I've got this thing, I've got this widget. Now I've just got to go and market it and sell it. Or normally it's, I've got to go and sell it. That doesn't work. So then I've got to go and put money into marketing. That didn't work. So then I need to put money into PR. That hasn't worked either. And it's because you're just focusing on the product side of things. You haven't built the connection between what's the job that the customer has to do, right? And what's painful about that. So I'm just going to show you a little video because this is what's called a strategizer tool. We use these a lot in, obviously, yeah, they were developed for early stage startups, but they work just as well in the research context as well. So I'll just show you a little video if the video works.
Every day, companies design products and services to improve their customers' lives. But 72% of new product and service innovations fail to deliver on expectations. This means that customers don't care about 7 out of 10 new products introduced to the market. It doesn't have to be this way. Just like you create value for your business with a business model canvas, there is in fact a tool to intentionally visualize, design, and test how you create value for customers. It's called the Value Proposition Canvas. The Value Proposition Canvas is composed of 2 parts, the customer profile and the value map. With the customer profile, you describe the jobs your customers try to get done. Jobs can be functional, like getting from A to B, social, like impressing friends and colleagues, or emotional, like gaining peace of mind. You highlight your customers' pains, which annoy customers while trying to get a job done. Pains and negative outcomes that customers hope to avoid, like dissatisfaction with existing solutions and challenges, frustrations, risks, or obstacles related to performing a job. And you outline customer gains, which describe how customers measure the success of a job well done. Gains are positive outcomes that customers hope to achieve, like concrete results, benefits, and even aspirations. Use the customer profile to visualize, test, and track your understanding of the people or companies you intend to create value for. It's a map that becomes clearer the more you learn about your customers. The second part of the canvas is the value map. With it, you list the products and services your value proposition builds on. You describe in which way these products, services, and features are pain relievers, how they eliminate, reduce, or minimize pains customers care about, making their life easier. And you outline in which way they are gain creators, how they produce, increase, or maximize outcomes and benefits that your customers expect, desire, or would be surprised by. The value map makes explicit how your products and services relieve pains and create gains. Use it to design, test, and iterate your value proposition until you figure out what resonates with customers. You achieve fit by creating a clear connection between what matters to customers and how your products, services, and features ease pain and create gains. Great value propositions target essential customer jobs, pains, and gains, and do so extremely well. Your customer profile may contain countless jobs, pains, and gains, but your value map highlights which ones you intend to focus on. But don't forget, an outstanding value proposition can still fail if your business model is flawed. Successful companies embed outstanding value propositions in scalable and profitable business models. Use the value proposition canvas to create products and services that customers want. Get started at strategizer.com.
Okay, that worked. That was good. So I think the 2 things for me is when you're looking at some of this, yes, you can access that. All you need to do is search for Strategizer or Value Proposition Canvas on YouTube. Okay, it's one of their core tools. It's the reason I include it. It's actually one of my favorite tools because I think so many people jump to solution mode without coming back to the customer and what job the customer has to do and what is painful about that, because we are motivated to solve painful problems. It's a whole bunch of stuff that we do day in, day out, right? But it's certain things that we're motivated to solve, okay? And so coming back to that, so looking at your ecosystem to work out your customer segments, getting as defined as you can, and then making some assumptions, right, around this, right? What do we think is painful in their job, right? What do we think is painful in their treatment? Those type of things, okay? That's where we use those two tools together, right? I wanted to include this just as a very high level. This is a slide that I tried to get the wonderful, beautiful AI to recreate for me, and all it gave me was a whole bunch of Excel spreadsheet cells on the slide. But if you've seen this before, and there is a video that you can go and watch this, the Simon Sinek video around Golden Circle as well. The what and the how is kind of the space that you will be playing in, okay? The why is why people engage, right, to buy products and services, okay? So you've got to be really, really right engaged around the why. And it's not, you know, a lot of the time in research and health and science and those kind of things, there's a fundamental belief inside as to why you're doing this, right? But a lot of the time that gets suppressed into the what and the how, because they're the technical skills. That's what people see, okay? So you need to think about how can you uncover that? You know, like I said before, one of my whys is I've been through this. I've had businesses, I've lost money that haven't worked, all those kind of things. I want to help people, you know, with the skills, like some of this stuff, so they don't make some of the mistakes that I had. And also we have some of the, like I said, we have some amazing solutions in our research institution. We just can't get them out, right? We just can't get enough commercialization people. So you've got to do some of this as the research thing, but you don't have to become an entrepreneur. It's just about taking one or two more steps and understanding some of this to make it a little bit easier for somebody else to pick up. So the circles is Simon Sinek's golden circle, right? And he talks about, you know, buy behavior and all those kind of things around that. What this has got is you need to work out who sits around that, right? So that's your customer segment that you're looking at. And then when you have that, linking the problem to the solution through a model like that with some of the tools to help you explore that, this is where it becomes really, really powerful, okay? And so it is this is really interesting. When you're in the space that I'm in, they're not all the same, but they're kind of connected, a lot of these things. And it all comes back to people. So, you know, Simon's video talks about why people buy Apple and those type of things as well, right? Is, you know, because the Apple products are expensive. And if you could see my desk, there's a lot of Apple products on it, right? But the reason I moved away from the Microsoft ecosystem was I didn't have time to tinker and play and do all these other things like I used to in my technical stuff beforehand. I just wanted stuff that I plug in and it worked. And so my why of buying Apple, even though I'm a bit of a design person, wasn't around whether it was a better chipset or it was, you know, different software or all those kind of things. My why of why I was motivated to move was you plug it in, it just worked, right? But that will not be the same as somebody else. And this is this whole approach of working out, right, as you go through this, what's the motivations to get somebody to help you build it? And so how do you go out and do this? And I've alluded to this, right? The answer is not a survey. I can tell you that now because there's so much bias that is built into this. And I know that you spend loads of time to do this. The answer is not a survey. The answer is going and talking to humans, right? And it is doing it in an open-ended, like I said before, tell me about the problems associated with this from your point of view. And then you go, okay, cool. Let's go and do it with somebody else, and so on and so on. And insights and themes will come out. Yes, you won't have the data in a nice table like you would with a survey and a click and a button and 70% said this. You've got to think about the insights that you get from it. And when you get the insight, and this is why you can't outsource this, right? Because when you get the insights, that's the powerful bit. So when you do all of these things, this is what most people don't do. They don't get the insights. They assume they know what's going on. There was a lady that I know in Perth. She's worked for Google. She's been a product person. She's been in and around startups and scale-ups a long time. She came out and she said, I'm going to help coach startup founders, right? Because I've got all this experience. She couldn't get it going because she lent into it going, I know this stuff. I've got my profile. What she didn't understand is that startup founders don't have the money to actually pay her to do what she needed to do. So now she's actually gone, it's taken me 9 months to work this out because I fell into the same traits that we actually talk to other people about. And so sometimes you've just got to sit there and go, all right, I'm starting a new project, or I want to have a look at something in a different way or whatever. What am I going to do? All right, let's map out the ecosystem. Then let's look at some of the problems around the jobs to be done. And then let's go and speak to some people and gather some insights. And this is a really good book to help you do that. Right. So this isn't just about, startups and those kind of things. It's about how do we do this on an ongoing basis? Products, services, business, all those kind of things. So if this interests you and you go, I want to have an approach at this, then go and have a look at that book. And so this is basically just telling you that what I just went through, right? So I'm one slide ahead of myself, right? Map out the segments. What problems do they have? Define your assumptions to create some questions, and then go and have those conversations. But make sure, and especially if you're extroverted, a bit like me, right? I can go off on a tangent all over the place, is structure your conversation. So I've got 3 questions to kind of prove or disprove my assumption that this person has a problem with X. But you don't want to ask them, do you have a problem with this? You want to get them to reveal it. So tell me about the last time that happened. What did you do in that occasion when it did happen? What's important to you at the moment, right? They might tell you they've got a problem, but if you ask them what's important, they list 3 other things that is not you. All right, so think about that. And your insights come from doing this, as you would know, right? In the science space, N does not equal 1 to give you statistical response and return on this, okay? So you've got to do it multiple times. That's where the depth comes from, the understanding of what you're trying to achieve. So what does this give you? So when you go out and use this approach, right? And this has come back to a couple of the questions I think that were on there before, right? Is when you go out and you start having this human-centered discovery approach, understanding some of the things which isn't about the technology, when you go and speak to your commercial, your IP team, whatever it is, they'll go, actually, these people have gone out and done something, right? They've gone out and spoken to people, not just about the technology. So it helps you have a different type of conversation with them. And again, like I said before, right, you got to build around your opportunity. You've got to build a bit of a village to help you go through that as well. And you won't build a village if all you're talking about is your technology and your science. Okay, I'm coaching 2 teams at the moment, and one of those teams is that's all they keep coming back to. Okay. If you go out and you talk to investors, because you're going to need, on your commercialization journey, you're going to need investors at some point. Okay. Again, if you've gone out and you've got the evidence, I went and spoke to X people that we believed were in our customer segment. 70% of them said, unprompted, that they had a problem with this, and it was one of their top 2 problems at the moment. Investors go, actually, all right, they've gone out, they know what's going on, rather than, oh, this is the next best thing. This will be great. We've got all of these awards. We've got all that kind of stuff. Investors kind of go, yeah, that's a bit of smoke and mirrors. They want facts. They want hard facts, because they're putting money into your venture, into you, into your team. The only reason they do that is they want to return, right? At some point, they want to return. So you've got to start doing this approach, getting you away from the science is everything, will actually hold you in good stead with them as well. What it does as a team, okay, is it helps you kind of build your networks internally with your people as well, right? It helps remove biases and experience, okay? And customers, like I've said, customers, it can help you find their customers. It can help you understand their problems. It can help you understand why, buyer behavior. So, tell me the last time you purchased a product like this. What is the process you went through? Doesn't have to be in the same area, but you're just starting to understand how hard or easy it's potentially going to be, right? And this can help inform your business model as well. If what you've got is a $250,000 a year subscription, right? And they go, oh, that's going to have to, anything that's over $100,000 has to go to procurement, and that slows it down, and we can't do this and we can't do that. And you say, okay, well, what do you do with smaller solutions? Oh, well, I can buy things up to $1,000 a month on my credit card. And so then that might help you work out okay, we still have the same solution, but we need a different offering to tap into that, which is easier. Okay. And so this thing, all of this builds evidence around your commercialization journey. Okay. And it also helps from a licensing deal with IP as well. Okay. And so as we go through this, right, as I've said, this is about, right, doing things together. This isn't about, oh, I've got this thing and I can't tell anyone about it. By all means, we often talk about putting your science, your technology, your patents, all that kind of stuff in a black box and don't talk about it, because we want to talk about all the other stuff that's around it. And we want to do it together with people as well, right? Because when you build things and when you do things together, amazing things happen. So I just want to kind of wrap up with a couple of minutes, right? I found this quote the other day, and it's amazing when when you're working on something and how other things pick up. And if anyone ever knows anything about the reticular activating system and all that kind of stuff, this is what happens. You're building a new slide deck that's based on things that you've got, but then all of a sudden these other things start appearing to you. And this quote was one of those, that doubt can only be removed by action. Okay. We talk about evidence. Bring me the evidence. Don't give me your theory and all that kind of stuff. Go and find the evidence. And that's what this approach takes you through. So if you're interested in some of this, here's some of the things that I've just included that I'm working on to give you different ideas around what's going on. So obviously the CSIRO on programs. For me, it's just been refunded. There's On Prime, which is all around customer development and customer discovery and understanding problems, which is kind of the entry level of what we've talked about. When you do that, there's then On Accelerate, and that's when you want to create a venture, when you want to accelerate it, when you want to get it out. Okay. I'm working on coaching some teams in that space at the moment, and you can tell the teams that haven't done Prime because the conversation is different. It's completely different, right, around where we go through that. And it's actually a bit of a disadvantage for those teams. So if you're interested in this, put the time and effort in, go and sign up and do Prime, okay? It's for teams. Cicada also do some work in this space as well, especially in the medtech space. I've run some programs with them before. A lot of things, is very, very similar. We might call things different things and that kind of stuff, but it's all very similar. The Industry Growth Center, MTP Connect, the Ready Grant, researcher, and entrepreneurial developer interchange, I think it is Ready. Things pop up. I know the Industry Growth Centers, some, I don't know what's happening with them, but the stuff around that. I do some work with an organisation in WA, which isn't that relevant for yourselves in Sydney, but THERI, which is the Centre of Entrepreneurial Research and Innovation, they run some programs around entrepreneurial mindset, like it's a 2-day boot camp, a concept to creation, which is all of the, that business model was kind of flipped up before, after the value proposition. They do it in concept to creation. It's like, what do you need to do across that, right? And then I run a customer development masterclass for 11 weeks, drilling down into what we've just done in 45 minutes. And if you go, yeah, that's great, but I got this covered, you can go, there is so much information out there it's online, it's in YouTube, you can get books, you can get network groups, all these type of things are out there. But what I've found over the years, the cadence of signing up to a program and going through it and being accountable, even if it's just a facilitator, right, or a coach or somebody else, but using that to actually get momentum, is when you're trying to change behavior, is usually more successful than I've got this covered and I'll go and do it myself. All right. It takes a lot more motivation to go, I've got to go and learn a new PowerPoint presentation tool. Okay. Yeah, you can. And the reason I put the Seri one up there is there's probably, I think there's the Sydney, is it the Sydney Startup Hub or Sydney Entrepreneurial Startup Hub or something like that. So if you go and have a look for Seri, you'll see the programs, and then you'll get some words in there, and then you can go, search in Google and go, is there a program that does this, in Sydney? All right, you will, when you go looking for these things, you will find people. They are generally not large organizations, right, like myself, that run it, because it's really hard to build a scalable business in this space. So you tend to find, facilitators, coaches, speakers in this thing run small, nimble, agile kind of businesses in this space. Big corporates, they'll go to Deloitte and EY. They've got design thinking practices, and you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then what happens is people drop back into how they've always worked anyway. It's a lot harder to do, like they always say, it's harder to turn the Titanic. So one of the things I always end with as well is, I know we've only got 5 minutes left, but if you want to have a chat, by all means, you can send me an email, give me a call. Again, another thing that beautiful AI is not quite there yet in this thing is I had to put, like, all my social stuff is Andy M. Lamb, but I couldn't just put in a little icon for each of those and say go to them. So I had to include it for everything. So, but you know what? And this is what we're trying to do, is sometimes these things, they're good enough. And that's what we want to try and do as we go through this. Okay. Is sometimes it's good enough, but go and explore, iterate, engage with people, and build your tribe as you go on this journey. And that is all I've got to say. All done and dusted.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was great. I learned so much. I hope everyone else here has as well. So if anyone had any questions, feel free to drop them in the next sort of 4 minutes. I also just wanted to highlight, to Andy's point, the Westmead Research Hub has, obviously, we've got the commercialization seminar series, and it's hosted by the commercialization group. So we're often hosting events, and we also send out notifications for accessing these types of programs. So make sure that you're looped into those emails. If you're not looped into them, I'll pop the sign up link to our newsletters, and that way when programs like Andy's become available, or anything that might be relevant, you'll get information about that. So any other questions from the...
Yeah, there's a couple. So the New South Wales Health commercialisation thing, New South Wales Health have done some work with Cicada around, they had a customer discovery development masterclass program. So go and have a look at that one. And then, yes, Space Cubed, Perth company, that's just opened up in your neck of the woods over there as well. So so there'll be a whole bunch of things going on there. It's interesting. Most of my work is actually on the East Coast and with national companies. So I don't do a lot of work with, I don't do any work with Space Cubed. But they do, they've got, facilitators and developers and, people that they're going to run programs and those kind of things as well. So get in touch, get engaged, even if it's just turning up to an event and meeting some people.
Networking is key.
Else? Yeah, that's it. That's it. Get out of the lab. We often talk about just go and do the work, get rid of all your biases and all your fears, and, coming back to that roller coaster thing. And, the one thing I can say is, with the thousands of people that I've worked with, if, and me and others, if we can get you over that cliff of removing some of that fear with some tools, this stuff works really, really well with research and science, right, and commercialization. It might have been born in the whole kind of techie Silicon Valley startup space, but you've got such an advantage because you already know how to run experiments. You're just running experiments with people, not in that sense, but because that would have to get ethics approval. But you're running your experiments just in a different way, and when it clicks, it clicks.
Fantastic. Well, if there's nothing else, might give ourselves
done.
a 1 minute early mark. Thank you so much, Andy, for being here with us. As I mentioned, yes, another little prop there from Julius about the Cyro on Prime program.
Hey, Julius.
Get involved, everybody. It's great to sort of continue learning and expand your knowledge around these sorts of things. And we'll be putting this webinar up on our YouTube channel, so you'll be able to come back to it and share it with other people within the Westmead network. And with that, I'll say goodbye. Thanks, Andy.
See you,
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Do you want to hang on, Katrina?
Yeah, I'll hang on.
Yep. All right. So do stop the recording.